Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Leytonstone in northeast London to Hackney Wick in East London. This ride takes about 25 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey also takes around 25 minutes but requires a change of tube line, so cycling could be a really convenient option to make this trip. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute too, then you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting on Leytonstone High Road at the junction with Burley Road, and we're going to turn around and head down that street. Burley Road is no entry for cars, but it's two-way for cycling, as you can see from those cycle symbols on the floor. It makes a relatively useful link to get to this pathway behind the station, which is going to get us over the railway and the motorway that runs next to it. This transport corridor is a big barrier to get around, something planners refer to as severance, and there are only a few places that you can actually get across. Fortunately for us, there is a reasonably well done walking and cycling bridge over it, with pedestrians on one side and cycling on the other, where there's red tarmac and cycle symbols indicating which side you can cycle. It drops us on a path on the other side of the motorway, which is also split, half for pedestrians and half for people on bikes, although note that the side on which you're meant to cycle has actually silently switched, so I've started riding on the left hand side now where the cycle symbols are. This in my view is a silly mistake, and given it's quite a narrow path at points anyway, I'm sure it leads to lots of needless arguments from people coming into conflict with each other. The good approach on the bridge of using different coloured tarmac to indicate which side is for cycling is also missing here, so if it ever gets to resurface, it would be good to add something like that. The path drops us onto Dyers Hall Road South, this little cul-de-sac here. It used to be part of Dyers Hall Road to the north of here, but it was severed from the main street when the A12 was built. That's a pretty common approach to street naming from the 20th century, by the way. For example, there's been a North Gower Street in Euston ever since the Euston Road was widened and cut Gower Street in half. We're now on Grove Green Road, and as you can see, we've got a really nice, pleasant two-way cycle track on here. You'd be on this side of the road no matter which direction you're doing the route in. This is the sort of infrastructure that the London Borough of Waltham Forest, which we're now in, really excels at, and it makes riding down main roads like this incredibly pleasant, and we don't have to mix with traffic. There is an oversight here though as we meet the junction of Cathal Road. There isn't actually a proper way to cross the junction there. The crossing there is actually a pedestrian crossing, not a toucan one, so you're not meant to cycle on it. I think what you're supposed to do is what we did, which is wait for the light and then head off to the cycle track on the other side of the street like I did. Though I assume in the long run the council will want to give that junction a bit of a redesign and a proper treatment. As you can see though, the two-way cycle track does continue down here past the junction. We'll keep going along here until we get to the junction of Langthorne Road, which is just coming up here on the left. It's been close to motor traffic and nicely redesigned as a public space with some planting and a cycle track going through it. We then turn right into Trelawn Road, where I think there's been another small oversight, this time with the signage. It's a no entry at the end that we entered, and it doesn't say accept cycles on the signs, but when you get here there is a blue and green cycleway sign directing cyclists travelling in this direction from Trelawn Road to use the parallel crossing that we just went on. So I assume that you're meant to go that way, but it would be good to have the signage at the eastern end of Trelawn Road sorted out too, as currently you're technically not meant to enter it from the other end, which doesn't really make sense as there's a crossing at the other end. That crossing is a neat little link to get us past the mini gyratory at the western end of Grove Green Road and onto Rockholt Road here. This street has a lightly protected cycle lane in the westbound direction, which we're using, but no lane in the eastbound. And as you can see, some people use the lane to go eastbound too. I don't blame that woman we saw at all. I think the fact that we're seeing her use it in the other direction shows how valuable the infrastructure is if she only feels comfortable cycling in here. I can also see why there's no lane on the other side of that bit. The street is quite narrow there, and the council had actually painted parking bays on the pavement there, as there's not even room for it on the carriageway. I hope that a fix can be found for that, as it's not ideal. It is only that short stretch though, and you can see that there is a protected cycle lane on the other side of the street here once it gets a bit wider. Pay close attention at this junction, by the way. You don't want to go down that road to the left, even though there is a cycle path. You want to do what I did and use the little cycle crossing to get up onto the painted cycle lane on the Eastway flyover, which actually passes over the Temple Mills rail depot where the Eurostar high-speed trains for the Channel Tunnel are stabled and looked after. We then find ourselves at a nicely done protected junction where we get our own green light. I did stop to let this man go first, but he insisted I go and motioned me across. Unfortunately, the cycle infrastructure does take a bit of a nosedive from this point onwards as we go towards the Olympic Park. We're on what is essentially a shared pavement. You can see the cycle symbols on the crossing here that allow us to cycle over the crossings, and there are the blue and white signs on the pavements which show that you're allowed to cycle down the pavement. It's a shared pavement, so if you see any people walking, just watch out for them. Make sure you don't go too quickly and give everybody plenty of space. I don't really like shared pavements at all. These ones are just about usable. They're fine in that there's very little footfall here, so you're unlikely to have to mix with lots of pedestrians, but as you can see, one of the downsides is they're very overgrown and narrow in parts, and they also give way at every minor road junction and slip road with a traffic light crossing, sometimes two as we had there. I stop at every red light in these videos, including crossings. You don't actually have to stop at red lights for crossings, as if you're on foot you can cross on a red, but if you do choose to cross on a red when you're doing this route, just make sure that there are no cars coming, as they do tend to sweep around the corner pretty fast here. These roads are built for high capacity, fast traffic. Given the huge roads and central reservations around here, I'd hope and expect that proper cycle lanes can be put down here in due course, but for now this is basically doable. It's safe, you're protected from motor traffic as long as you pay attention at the junctions, but frankly this section is pretty subpar. Apparently the reason there are a lot of fast roads like this around the Olympic Park is because when a city gets the contract for the Olympic Games, the contract stipulates that you have to be able to get from one venue to another within a certain time, and the easiest way to meet that condition is to run fast roads across the park. So that's led to some pretty silly planning decisions which the Borough of Newham is now basically having to unpick to make the place livable. To be fair, they are doing that pretty determinedly in other parts of the park, so I hope they get to that bit as well. Fortunately, when you do get onto Waterden Road here, the cycle track does take a slightly more recognisable shape and you do get your own space, which is much more comfortable to ride down than those shared pavements that we were on a minute ago. If you look in the distance ahead of us, by the way, you can see the Orbit Tower, a large piece of public art done by Anish Kapoor. It's Britain's largest piece of public art and was supposed to be a lasting symbol of the Olympic Games, but it's never really found that much affection or fame. Interestingly, if you look at the TfL Santander hire bikes, they've got about half a dozen different famous London landmarks painted on them, and also this, which I do find a little bit funny as it's not quite up there with Big Ben or the London Eye, but I guess they were just being optimistic. That on the left, by the way, is the Copper Box, which is another ex-Olympic venue. You can see basketball there for 14 quid. I really enjoyed it. Definitely recommend it if you want to try something a bit different. We are going to take this bridge over the River Lee Navigations. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a ramp on the other side, but you have two options. One is the elevator just there on the right, and the other is to dismount and use the bike channel down the stairs like I'm doing, which helps you push your bike down. You can see it's got a little channel for your wheel that I'm slotting my wheel into. That isn't ideal, and I know that some people can't dismount. I get that they've built an elevator, but those don't always work, and you'd think that for all the money that they'd spent on the Olympics, they could have built a bridge with a ramp, to be honest, but this is what we've got, unfortunately. We've now found our way to Hackney Wick though, which is the destination of this video. I'm just going to take us around to the overground station. If you enjoyed this video though, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and thanks once again to everyone who helps keep the channel going by supporting it on the Patreon. If you like the work that I'm doing here and you're feeling generous and you want to support it, then there is a link in the description below the video where you can sign up to throw money at me. Just a reminder that if you want to download a free map of the route, you can find it linked in the description below the video. It's on a website called Komoot, and there is a GPX format file that you can download and use on whatever app or device you prefer. And while you're there, make sure you check out the map of all the different London cycle routes videos, which was put together by a viewer called Isaac. Thanks very much, Isaac. Really useful resource that helps you find all the different videos that I've done in your part of town or a part of town that you're particularly interested in. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all again next time.